The next type of error you might encounter is known as a runtime error, and these are usually the most difficult errors to diagnose, in my opinion, and this is where I see a lot of people struggling. So there's no one right way of going about doing this, but I've seen two really effective methods for debugging runtime errors, and one of those is using a debugger, and the other one is using print statements. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of using a debugger because I work with multiple languages or a vast array of languages and in different development environments. And each environment has its own debugger, and all the debuggers work slightly differently, and they all have their own benefits and drawbacks. And I don't want to bother learning how to use a bunch of different debuggers. And also, I've used print statements all my life, which is the second way of going about doing it. And it's my tried and true method, and it's always worked for me. And if I'm being completely honest here, I've never really had to go to anyone for help with debugging because I've followed this process and it just works. So hopefully I'm sharing it because maybe it might work for you as well as it does for me. I want to stress that I know I put look it up as an option or as a step here, but I want to emphasize that that's only as a last resort, and that most runtime errors that you run into, you can figure out just by looking through your code, figuring out what doesn't look right, and fixing it yourself. So, when it comes to runtime errors, the first step is to determine the line number at which the error is occurring. And similarly to syntax errors, this usually isn't a very difficult thing to do because when you run your program, you'll get some sort of output that says, this exception was caught here in this line. So it will usually tell you the class and function. It might not tell you the function, but it'll at least tell you the class in which the error occurred or the file in which the error occurred. And then it'll tell you the line number at which it occurred. Sometimes it can be difficult to determine the exact line number at which the error occurs when it gives you multiple line numbers. And the reason it does that is because it follows every function call that you make. And for those of you who program in Java, just so you know, methods are the same thing as functions. So I'm going to be using the term function, but that's the same thing. So sometimes you'll call a function, and then there will be an error inside that function, or in the code within that function. So it'll give you both the line numbers, the line where you called the function, and also the line where the error occurred inside the function. And so you have to determine which one of those is actually where the error is directly occurring. And a good method that I like to use for doing that is look at the line numbers for each of the functions or classes that you wrote, because it'll tell you it occurred in this file or in this class, here's the line number. And for all the ones that you wrote, look at those and ignore any of the library functions that were already written for you. And then look at the last line number that you're given. And usually that's going to be the innermost function that you wrote at which the error occurred. So in order, it's going to say you executed this function called another one, that called another one, that called another one. And that last one, that's the one where the actual error occurred before some problems started happening in some library functions later on. You can ignore those because we're assuming there's nothing wrong with the libraries you were given. So after you've determined the line number, the next step is to check whether it's a very simple fix. So go to the actual line at which the error is occurring. And first, forget about the variables. Forget about the references to objects. Just look at the pluses, the minuses, the equal signs, the dots, any sort of operator. And maybe you're just using the wrong operator. That might be an issue. Then after you've looked at that and made sure that that's not the problem, the next thing to look at is, did you use the right variable names? Because a lot of the times you might, or a lot of the times I accidentally write one variable name when I really mean another, and it still compiles correctly, let's say, because it's the same type, but when it comes down to runtime, it doesn't run correctly. It throws a runtime error. But it's important to rule this out so you don't delve a lot of your time in these sorts of things when it was a simple fix the entire time.